So you know those sources you shared, the ones on leadership. Yeah, those Leadership Under Starlight excerpts.
Yeah.
I gotta say, they're pretty thought-provoking. It's like a whole different way of looking at leadership,
Right.
especially compared to all that, what's it called, that always-on, high-pressure stuff we hear so much about.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's what's so interesting about this philosophy, right? It really goes against that whole traditional command and control thing.
Right.
And it's like they're looking for guidance from a different source,
Hmm.
less like intense spotlight and more like starlight. It's clearly been shaped by the later days crew and their leader, Bannock.
Okay, so for this deep dive, I think our mission, right, is to really get into what leading under Starlight actually is,
Mhm.
like what makes it tick, what are the core ideas, what jumped out at you when you first saw all this?
Honestly.
Hmm.
Uh, well, it was a whole counter-narrative thing. Like, it's a totally different story about leadership. We'll be digging into this whole starlight metaphor, which is pretty central to it all.
Yeah, I was curious about that.
And then there's this thing about growth over goals, which is, well, it makes you think.
It does, yeah.
And then you've got the emotional integrity piece, which is huge EE in this whole thing.
Mm-mm.
Honestly, it suggests a way of leading that feels, I don't know, more human and probably more effective in the long run.
Yeah, for sure. More human. Okay, so leading under Starlight, if you had to boil it down, what's the absolute core of it, the foundation?
Well, the way I see it, it's about three main shifts.
Oh,
First, you got to put growth ahead of hitting specific goals.
okay.
Then connection, real connection. That's more important than just controlling everything. And finally, you got to be in it for the long haul. Sustainability, not just quick wins.
Gotcha.
Basically put people first. They believe that if you take care of your team, really nurture them,
Yeah.
the goals will kind of take care of themselves.
Interesting. So growth over goals. I mean, that's almost the opposite of what you usually hear about leadership. That's the source material say about that?
Well, it says, and I think this is important, success isn't a final destination, but a consistent practice of growth and connection.
Mm.
It even mentions those song lyrics, Lead Under Starlight and Take the Long Way Home,
Oh, yeah.
which, they really capture that whole idea, right?
Right.
Think of it this way. Goals are like milestones on a map.
Okay.
They help you know if you're going in the right direction. But growth is the actual engine that moves you forward.
I see.
If you're only focused on those milestones, well, you might burn out, right? And then what happens when you hit them? You lose momentum.
Mhm.
Plus, you might get so focused that you miss out on learning new things along the way.
Makes sense.
When you focus on growth, though, you create a system where you're always learning, adapting, improving.
Yeah.
That leads to better results over time, even if you have to adjust the original goal.
So it's about setting things up for success, not just demanding it.
Exactly. And then there's the people before product idea.
Right. That was another big one. How does that work with this whole leading under Starlight thing?
Well, the source material argues that when people feel truly valued, like they're seen and heard, and their work matters, well, they naturally become more motivated, right?
Right.
They want to collaborate, to excel. It specifically talks about how Bannock was as a leader, like he was a mentor, he was emotionally present, and that created a way stronger team spirit than any kind of pressure or fear ever could. It's about making people want to do their best, not feel like they have to.
Less stick, more carrot.
Exactly. More like genuine care and support.
Yeah.
And that brings us to the third part, which is adaptation through relationship.
Right. So what's the thinking behind that one?
Basically, it's about how teams deal with change, especially when people come and go.
Yeah.
Yeah, that could be tough.
Exactly.
This philosophy says that strong teams adapt through understanding, not panic or blame. Like, everyone knows their role, and they're all committed to growing together, even when things shift. This shared awareness, as they call it, it's crucial. It stops what they call institutional amnesia, where all that knowledge disappears when people leave.
Oh, I've seen that happen.
Right.
Yeah.
And it also creates more supportive environment so people don't get resentful during transitions.
So it's a smoother, more resilient way to handle change. And then there's the whole emotional integrity thing. That's interesting because traditionally, showing emotions is often seen as a weakness in leadership.
Right, but that's where this philosophy is different. Bannock believed that empathy and emotional honesty are actually strengths, like powerful, stabilizing forces.
Really?
By encouraging emotional check-ins, by making it okay to talk about feelings, you can prevent burnout, conflicts, and people leaving the team. Talks about going down with the ship and first one in, last one out.
Those sound pretty intense.
Yeah, but it's not about, martyrdom or anything. It's about showing that you are truly invested in the well-being of your crew. And that builds loyalty and resilience.
Interesting.
Plus, research actually shows that psychological safety, which comes from that emotional honesty, helps teams be more innovative and productive. If people feel safe to be vulnerable to share their concerns, they're more likely to take risks and contribute their best ideas.
That makes sense. Okay, so it's not about getting all sentimental. It's about acknowledging that people have feelings and that those feelings matter.
Right. And finally, there's that whole idea of sustainability through ritual and reflection. What kind of rituals are we talking about here?
Yeah, I was wondering about that.
So the document mentions things like Bannock stargazing, Val consistently preparing meals, Kelly gardening.
Okay.
You might think these are just personal habits, right?
Yeah, I kind of did.
But they're seen as really important anchors. These small rituals, both individual and maybe some collective ones, they help ground people, especially when things are uncertain or stressful.
Yeah, I see.
And that contributes to the team's well-being and stability in the long run. It helps prevent burnout and builds a stronger sense of shared identity and purpose.
Okay, so we've covered those foundational principles. Now, the document also contrasts this with what it calls power-driven leadership. What are some of the key differences there?
Yeah, so the table in the excerpts lays it out really clearly. So you've got Starlight leadership, which is all about trust, right?
Right.
And then you've got power-driven leadership, which operates from a place of fear and authority. Starlight leaders are looking at the long game, the big picture. Power-driven leaders, well, they're all about those short-term wins, often at the expense of long-term stability, which is, well, something we see a lot in the business world, don't we?
Yeah, that constant pressure to deliver results now, it can really hurt a company in the long run. What else do they point out?
Another huge difference is how they delegate. Starlight leadership is about spreading responsibility around, trusting people to do their jobs. Power-driven leaders, they like to keep all the power at the top and make all the decisions themselves. And then there's the whole thing about being vulnerable, being willing to adapt.
Okay.
Starlight leaders know they don't have all the answers. They're okay with changing course if they need to. Power-driven leaders, not so much.
Right.
They tend to get defensive, rigid. They hate admitting mistakes.
Yeah, that sounds familiar.
And don't even get me started on how they handle emotions. Starlight leadership encourages emotional honesty, open communication.
Right.
Power-driven leaders, they think emotions are a distraction.
Interesting.
So you have one approach that values the human side of things and another that tries to suppress it. That makes a huge difference in the team's culture.
Yeah, totally. So basically, we have two totally opposite ways of leading. Now, someone listening might be thinking, okay, the Starlight thing sounds good on paper, but what about the real world? What about tough decisions, tight deadlines? And you know what? The document addresses these critiques head on. Let's talk about that first one. It's too soft.
Yeah, I could see how someone might say that, especially if they're used to a more assertive style of leadership.
Right.
Like maybe they think empathy and flexibility mean you're not a strong leader. But Bannock had a great response to this. He said, soft doesn't mean weak.
I like that.
It actually takes a lot of strength to be vulnerable, to be honest about your mistakes, to be transparent with your team. Way more strength than just throwing your weight around.
Yeah, totally. It's easy to be a bully. Okay, what about the second critique? That without pressure, people get lazy. Like they need some fear to get them going.
Well, this philosophy challenges that idea. Like using fear might get you results in the short term, but in the long run, it's not sustainable. It's dehumanizing. It leads to burnout, people not caring, and way less creativity. They argue that true motivation comes from something deeper. Belonging to the team, feeling like your work matters, being aligned with a shared purpose. They talk about how Bannock's crew thrived, not because they were afraid, but because they were aligned and respected each other.
So it's about intrinsic motivation, not fear.
Exactly. Okay, ready for the final critique?
Hit me with it.
Decisions need to be fast, not democratic.
Yeah.
Especially in a crisis, waiting for everyone to agree can be disastrous.
Right.
But here's the thing. In Starlight leadership, they spend so much time building trust beforehand that when a crisis does hit, well, the team already trusts the leader to make the right call quickly. They don't need to be an authoritarian jerk about it.
So it's like that trust gives them the flexibility to act fast when they need to.
Exactly. It's like having social capital you can cash in when things get tough.
I like that analogy. Okay, now, the document also talks about some philosophical connections, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure. This stuff is just coming out of nowhere.
Right. Like, who else is thinking along these lines?
Well, they mentioned Confucius, for example.
Okay.
He was all about leading through virtue and setting a good example, which, is very Starlight-ish.
Yeah, I can see that. What else?
Then there's Ubuntu philosophy. That's all about interconnectedness and shared humanity. I am because we are.
Right.
And that aligns really well with that whole connection over control thing.
It does.
Oh, and they also mentioned servant leadership.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of that.
That's where the leader's main job is to serve the team, help them grow.
Right.
And that's really at the heart of Starlight leadership, too.
It's like a common thread.
Definitely. And there are even echoes of Stoicism,
There
with
are.
the focus on resilience and duty. But with a twist, they add empathy to the mix.
Nice.
It's about having that inner strength, but also being compassionate.
I like that. So these connections really give this whole philosophy some weight,
Absolutely. And to make it even more real world, the document gives some examples of where you might actually see these principles in action.
Okay, I'm curious. Where?
Well, they talk about education, for example. Teachers who focus on creating a supportive classroom often get better results than those who just drill kids for tests. In business, they mention companies like Patagonia and Basecamp.
Oh, yeah.
They're known for taking care of their employees, valuing work-life balance. They have a strong company culture.
Yeah.
And they're super successful.
Yeah, they are.
Even in creative fields like animation studios or music groups. The best teams are the ones that create a safe space where people can be open and honest with each other.
So these principles can apply to all sorts of different areas. It's not just some theoretical leadership model.
Exactly. Now, to get a bit more practical, they actually offer some specific tools and metaphors to help people grasp this whole thing.
Okay, let's dig into that. They go deeper into the core principles, right?
They do.
Yeah.
Think of these as like Bannock's leadership commandments or something. They guide how he makes decisions and interacts with people every day.
Give me an example.
Like one of them is people over profit.
Okay.
Doesn't mean you ignore the money, but you realize that having a happy, engaged team, well, that's actually the best way to be profitable in the long run.
Gotcha.
Another one is purpose over performance. That's about making sure people understand why they're doing what they're doing. It gives their work meaning.
Right.
And clarity over control, that's a big one. It's about setting clear expectations, giving people what they need, then trusting them to do their thing without micromanaging.
I like that. What else?
Well, there's progress over perfection, which basically means it's okay to make mistakes. You learn from them.
It's about the journey, right?
Yes. And then there's ritual over rush.
Interesting name.
It's about creating routines and practices that help people stay grounded instead of just constantly rushing around.
I could use some of that in my life.
Right. So these principles act like a moral compass for a Starlight leader.
Okay, so those are the nitty-gritty details of the core ideas. Then there's that whole navigation metaphor, the star map model. What is that all about?
So imagine like a compass, right? Each direction represents a different aspect of leadership. North is purpose, like the big Y. East is connection, all about the team's relationships. South is sustainability, making sure things can last in the long term.
And west?
West is adaptability, being able to learn and change.
Gotcha.
Now, between those directions, you have 4 stars. Each one stands for an important quality: integrity, curiosity, resilience, and empathy. So you can use this model to check in with yourself, see where you're strong, where you might need to focus.
Oh, that's a useful tool. Okay, what about that subpersonalities as archetypes thing? That sounds pretty deep.
It is. It's based on the idea that everyone on the team brings something different to the table, different strengths, different approaches. The document talks about different subpersonalities in the later days crew. Each one represents a different part of Starlight leadership. For example, Addie is all about adventure and morale. She brings energy and enthusiasm. Kelly is compassion and harmony. She focuses on people's feelings and relationships. Val is all about execution and sustainability. She's the one who gets things done and makes sure things run smoothly.
So different people, different roles.
Exactly. The idea is that a good leader recognizes these differences and knows how to leverage them. Like if there's a crisis, Bannock might rely on someone with that structure subpersonality to get things organized quickly.
Makes sense.
But he'd also make sure that the compassion person was there to look after everyone's well-being. It's about having a balanced team, really.
Yeah, it's about harnessing everyone's strengths.
Yeah.
Now, they also included some quotes and mottos from the crew. What were some of those? They sound fun.
Oh, yeah, they're great. Val has one that goes, "Efficiency matters, but not if you burn out your engine trying to shave off minutes.
Wise words.
It really shows how much they value sustainability.
Totally.
And Kelly has a beautiful one. You don't always have to fix it. Sometimes just sitting with someone is enough.
Oh, that's sweet.
And then there's Gavin. He says, leadership is about choosing the harder right over the easier wrong.
Very philosophical. I like how these quotes, make this whole philosophy feel more human.
They do, right. Okay, so now we know the principles, the metaphors.
Yeah.
How does it all come together in practice? The document talks about a leadership in practice cycle.
Right. Tell me about that.
It's like this. Leading isn't about standing on a pedestal and barking orders. It's a constant cycle, a flow.
Okay.
First, you listen.
Oh, okay.
Really listen, not just to what people are saying, but to what they need, what they're worried about, what they hope for. You have to pay attention to the big picture, too.
Right. Got it.
Then you reflect, like what's working, what's not, what needs to change.
Yeah.
Then you adapt.
Yeah.
You make those changes based on what you've learned. And this is key. You empower your team.
How do you do that?
Give people clear responsibilities. Give them the freedom and resources to do their job and trust them. But it doesn't stop there. You also need to support them. Offer encouragement, help them out with logistics, mediate conflicts.
Be there for them.
Exactly.
Right.
And then you repeat the whole cycle. Because leadership is an ongoing process, right? You're always learning, always adjusting, always growing.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, let's face it, no matter how good a leader you are, sometimes things go wrong. How does Starlight leadership handle crises?
The first thing is to stay calm.
Right? Don't panic.
Focus on safety and take care of your team's well-being. You don't want everyone freaking out.
Okay.
If you need to act fast, do it.
Okay.
But get input from your trusted people, just like Bannock would rely on Devin or Val. And afterwards,
With them.
you reflect.
Yeah.
What happened? What can we learn from this? Who was most affected? What weaknesses were exposed?
Oh, that's a good point. A lot of leaders just want to move on after a crisis.
Right. They miss out on a chance to learn and grow. Starlight leadership uses those moments to strengthen the trust and understanding within the team.
So it's not just about surviving the crisis, it's about learning from it.
Exactly. It's about resilience.
Okay, now they also have some toolkits for external application.
Yes.
What are those? Like actual tools people can use?
Exactly. Like there's a daily crew check-in template with questions you can use to see how your team is doing.
Give me an example.
Things like, how is your energy level today? Or is there anything bothering you?
That's simple but effective.
Right. And they have a conflict resolution flowchart to help people work through disagreements constructively, and a role mapping template to help understand everyone's strengths and needs.
Wow, so they really give you concrete ways to put this stuff into action.
They do. Now, if you're up for it, we could circle back to those philosophical parallels. I could tell you a bit more about a couple of them.
Sure, why not? We've got time.
So, one interesting connection is with Jungian psychology. Remember those subpersonalities?
Yeah.
Well, they kind of relate to Jung's idea of archetypes, those universal patterns of human experience.
I see.
Having different subpersonalities on a team is like having different archetypes. It brings balance.
Right.
And then there's servant leadership. That one's super important because it really highlights that a Starlight leader is there to serve their team, help them grow, support them.
Not just boss them around.
Exactly. It's not about ego or control. It's about helping everyone thrive.
I love that. Okay, as we wrap up this deep dive, what would you say is the most important thing for our listeners to take away from all this?
I think the biggest takeaway is that true leadership isn't about being the loudest voice in the room or always chasing the next deadline.
Yeah.
It's about creating a culture of trust, a commitment to growth, and real human connection. It's about playing the long game.
Right. It's a marathon, not a sprint. So what are some key points our listeners can apply right away?
I think shifting your mindset is a big one. Focusing on the long term, on helping your people grow. That's huge. And remembering that how you treat people makes a huge difference in how well they perform. And maybe the most surprising thing, empathy, vulnerability, all those so-called soft skills. Well, they're not weaknesses. They're actually strengths.
They're essential. It really makes you rethink what it means to be a strong leader, doesn't it?
It does.
So here's a final thought for our listeners. Think about these principles of leading under Starlight. Could you apply even one of them in your own life? At work, at home, anywhere?
Yeah.
And which of those guiding stars, purpose, connection, sustainability, adaptability, integrity, curiosity, resilience, empathy, speaks to you the most right now? Think about it. This philosophy, this idea of being guided by starlight, not by the blinding glare of pressure and deadlines. Well, it's a different way of thinking about success, isn't it?
It is.
It makes you realize that the best journeys are the ones we take with intention, with connection, with a long-term perspective.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Thanks for diving deep with us. Until next time, keep looking for those guiding stars.